This is ConciseBaba Metziah Daf Lamed Aleph, and we're holding on Lamed Amid Beis. We began the Mishnah in the end of the previous year, and we're going to pick it up from the Gemara. The Mishnah taught us what is a Aveda, a Chamar, a Para, Royin, Baderech, and the Mishnah taught us how you have to return them. And we said if it's Royim Baderech Ein Zaveda Fuchin Ratza Bin Akramim, then Harezu Aveda. But the obvious question is, we're holding on Daf Lamed. We've been in Elam Mitzias for the last, week or so. We had many cases of different types of Avedas. So the question is, what exactly does the Mishnah mean by saying Ezehi Aveda? What is an Aveda? And differentiating between the donkey whose items just fell off and between a animal running in the vineyards, etc. So asks the Gemara, Atu Kolhani, Tamrina and Lav Aveda. Is everything else that we spoke about not an Aveda Avoy? So Amr Rav Yehuda, says Rav Yehuda, no. Let's delve a drop deeper into the Mishnah. Hachi Kamer. Ezehi Klal Aveda Shu Chayiv Ba. What is a klal? The Mishnah is not giving a case. What is a rule? What is the aveda that one is obligated in? If the animal is merely grazing on the side of the road, that is not called an aveda, and one does not have to be concerned with it. If a chamar and the utensils overturned, or the cow is running between the vineyards, harezu aveda. So what's just changed was a slight nuance, which of course is always a world of a difference. The Mishnah is not listing that this is the only case of Aveda. Rather, what the Mishnah is listing is the Mishnah is telling us that these are the guidelines, the rules of Aveda. Continues the Gemara, Ulailam. Is this always true? You see an animal on the side of the road on Sunday, you leave it there. The same animal is there on Monday, you leave it there. Tuesday, you leave it there. Says the Gemara, this is getting ridiculous. So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, 3 lines from the bottom, Ad Shleisha Yamim. Until 3 days, you can assume that the owner left it there. After 3 days, then it does get a din of an Aveda. Says the Gemara, Echi Dami, what is precisely the case? If you saw the animal grazing at night, even one time it should yes get a din of an aveda. If it's during the day, then many times it would not get a din of aveda. Explains the Gemara, says the Gemara, the case of the Mishnah is it's early in the morning, or at night after Shkia. So twice a yami for 3 days amrinan. It's a rumi, it's ramulei, vinavka. 3 times you could say the animal went out because these are not the normal times for the animal to graze. But 3 times you could say the animal went out early in the morning, late at night. Tfei, but more than 3 times vade avedahi. Says the Gemara Tanam Yach, let's bring a raya to this thing. Matzatalis, someone finds a garment, v'kar doim, or he finds an axe, as we turn over to Lamed Aleph Amid Aleph Bisratia in a public area, Upar Ratza Bin Akramim, or a cow that is running through the vineyards. Says the Mishnah, says the Braisa, Rezu Aveda, it has the din of an Aveda. Talis Semer, Talis Mitzad Geder, a garment on the side of a fence, Kardaim Mitzad Geder, an axe on the side of a fence. Upara roya bein akramim, or a cow that is grazing between the vineyards. Ein zu aveda. So far, it's giving very similar dinim to the Mishnah. And now here's the raya. Gimel yamim zachar zeh harei zu aveda. Once it's grazing for 3 consecutive days, it's considered an aveda. Ramayin sheshaytinu bayin. Harei zu gaider b'fneihem. See water rushing, you should make up friends in front of it. to protect the field that it is rushing forth. So that's the raya to our din that 3 days gets it a din of an aveda. Continues the Gemara 6 lines down, Lamed Aleph, Amid Aleph, Amar Rava. Says Rava, says the Torah, L'chol avedas achicha, the rabbis, what does that include? Avedas karka, that even land could be lost, and one has to prevent the fields from being lost. So if there's water rushing towards your friend's field, you have to do what you can to quote-unquote return the lost item, meaning to prevent the field from being lost. Amarli Rav Chananya l'Rava, Tanya de Messiah loch, I'll bring you a raya. You see water rushing, make a fence in front of it. Amar le, Rava responded, Imi shama loitistayeh. That itself is not a raya. Why? Because maybe the case was where there are bundles of wheat there, and that's why you're protecting it, but not for the field itself. Says the Gemara, Yidika Amarin, might remember what's the Chiddush? There's wheat that still needs the ground to grow. So because it's attached to the ground, it's like the land itself. And therefore you don't have to save it. Kamashlan, you do have to save it, and therefore Rava says that but not necessarily do you have a raya from this brisa. Continues the Gemara quoting the Mishnah 12 lines down, the two dots, Matzachamaru para. The chulu grazing is not aveda, but if its items are overturned off the donkey's back, etc., it is an aveda. Says the Gemara, the classical kasha, ha gufa kasha. We have a stira. Amri matchamaru para rayim baderech. It's grazing into aveda rayim baderech udulay aveda. So that seems simple. I only because it's grazing by the road. Haratza baderech. But if it was running by the road, v'raya bin akramim, or it was grazing between the vineyards, haveveda. But then, of course, Ema Sefer comes on the Sefer and says, Chamar v'kilav afuchen u'bar ratza bin akramim, harezu aveda. From here we can imply ratza bin akramim udavi aveda. Haratza baderech v'raya bin akramim ein zu aveda. So the classical kasha, the stira between the Reisha and the Seifa. Amar Abaye, so comes along Abaye, and Abaye says, Yagid alav reyay. Let one case shed light on the next case. And he explains 2 lines from the medium-sized lines. Tana raya baderech lavi aveda. Teaches the case of grazing by the road, it's not an aveda. Vuadin the raya ben akramim. Tana retza ben akram daved vuadin ratza baderech. Says Abaye, the way to read the Mishnah is don't read it that each case is coming to add on Chedushim, but rather, says Abaye, the way to read the Mishnah is Huadin, that each case is teaching me this is a din, and Huadin in a similar scenario. That's how Abaye wanted to explain the Mishnah. Comes along Rava on the first medium-sized line and says, Rava, Amalei, Rava, Iyagil of Reya, if you're going to tell me the context should teach us what to say, listni kilta, let it say the more lenient din v'kolshkin chamita. And then we would learn from there, by matter of implication, the more stringent din. List, teach me a case of running in the road as an aveda v'kolshkin, ratza bin akram. List, Raya bin akram aveda v'kolshkin raya baderech. So Rava does not like the way that Abaye reconciles the Mishnah. And rather, Ella Amar Rava on the 4th medium-sized line comes along Rava, and Rava answers the kasha, the steer in the Mishnah, as follows. Ratza like kasha, hadab legabe dibra, hadab legabe masa. Says Rava, there can be 2 cases of running, but where the animal is running towards the dibra, the wild, away from its owner, that's when it's considered an aveda. But if it's running towards the town, then it's not an aveda. One is talking about the Mishnah that says it's not avidas where we're talking about the animal itself. Kam ba'avidas karka, we're talking about the karka, where the karka would be considered lost because the animal is grazing on that random person's field. And explains Rava further. Kik atani raya baderech lot delay avi avida. Hara bin akramim avi aveda. Why? Why is grazing in the kramim and aveda? But aveda's karka. It's not aveda of the animal. You're right, but it's an aveda of the lands being lost. Yutani rata bin akramim avi aveda. Haraya bin akramim lay avi aveda as well as what? But aveda gufa is the animal itself. The rata bin akramim. Because the animal is running between the vineyards, what's going to happen? Misakba, it could get injured. It does not get injured. So that's how Rava reconciles the Mishnah. V'raya bin akramim concludes the Gemara nehid loy misakva. You're telling me that if it grazes in the vineyard, it doesn't get ruined. But wait, what about the point that you, Rava, just told me that we have to be concerned that it's ruining the field? Explains the Gemara b'dekusi, talking about that the vineyard belongs to a guy, therefore we don't have the same chiyuv to protect his field. Says the Gemara, okay, but if the field is owned by a guy, why don't we say you have to remove the animal because the animal could get lost, the Dilma Katzli law, because maybe the guy is going to see this animal and kill it. We're talking about a place where they first warned the person that the animal's in his field, and only then they kill it. They're not going to shoot him right away. Maybe he's already warned. If the owner was warned and he wasn't careful, and therefore you seeing that animal grazing there, you have no obligation to take care of it. Continues the Gemara to the latter part of the Mishnah. The latter part of the Mishnah dealt with how many times one is obligated to perform the same din of Hashavas Haveda. Chazra, Echzira, Ubarcha, Echzira, Ubarcha. You return the animal and it keeps on running away 4 or 5 times. You have to return it. Why? We learn out from the pasuk. Says the Gemara 3 lines from the very wide lines. Amalei Humi Rabbanan the Rava. Ema Hashev Chadazimna. Teshivim Trezimna. You're telling me the Mishnah said Hashev Teshivim Ifilu many times. Why? Maybe Hashev is 1 and Teshivim is 2. Amar le Hashev Afilu Kuf Pamamasha. The word Hashev, you have to return the animal. Itself connotes even 100 times. Teshivim Emli Alabesai. Liginasi L'Charbasai Minayin. Teshivim teaches me a different thing. Teaches me that you have to return an object to his house. Where do we know that you also are allowed to return it to his garden? You're also allowed to return it to his deserted building. That you're allowed to fulfill your obligation to return it wherever you want. Says Dami, what's going on? If this deserted place is guarded, then what? Then Pshita. Then obviously you could return it there. And Idalai Minter on the second very wide line. Why are you allowed to return it there? Says the Gemara, Leilam de Minter, it is guarded. V'hat Kamashal, what's the Chiddush? Labidin Das, Bailim, Och de Rav Elazar. Tamar, what does Rav Elazar teach us? Hakal, Tzrich, and Das, Bailim. You always need the owner to be aware of what's going on. Chutz! Me'ashavas Haveda. If you're returning an object to another person, the owner does not need to know about it. Why? Shahat Torah Ripsa Shavas Arbeik. The Torah included many types of returning, and that's how the Gemara says. We learn at Hashev Teshivim that one, not only do you return it many times, you keep returning to other areas without the Das Bailim. Says the Gemara. Now we're going to go on a similar journey. Hashev Teshivim, different psukim that are similar, and the dinim learned from there. So Shalech to Shalech, this is by Shluach Hakan, that you could send away the mother bird many times. Says the Gemara, Ema, maybe Shalach means Chada 1 time, Zimna. To Shalach Trezim, the Amrli responds, no, Shalach Avilamim Pamashma. To Shalach Inli Ledvar Rishos, Ledvar Mitzvah Minayin. Where do we know that even Ledvar Mitzvah, that you even have to send her away? Tamalomar Tishalach Mikol Makaim. You have an obligation to send the mother away in all cases. Amr Le'umir Rabban Rav Aveima Cheach Chadazim the Ticheach Trezimna. Amr Le the exact day Cheach Afil Kopam Mashachich and the Rav the Talmud. Talmud the Rav Minayim. Where do we know that there's even a din of the Chach of a Talmud the Rav, a big chiddush? Of course, doing it appropriately. Talmud Le Cheach to Cheach Mikol Makaim. We continue with more examples. Azoiv ta azoiv, says the pasuk. Says the pasuk that there's an obligation of to help the donkey's owner. Azoiv ta azoiv. Azoiv ta azoiv imai, excuse me. You have to surely help him. Says the Gemara, Ein li ela by levimai. I only know if the owner is there. Shein by levimai minayin. Tamalemar azoiv ta azoiv mikol makayim. Hakim takim. Another pasuk that you have to help the owner to raise up his animal under the heavy load. Imai. Ein li, lines to the bottom, I would only know ela by levimai, that if the owner is there. Shein by levimai minayin tamalemar hakim takim mikol makam. V'lamali, why do we need this pasuk? Lemichtav prika, v'lamali lemichtav tina. Says the Gemara, why do we need two different psukim? One to discuss unloading and one to discuss loading. We could have written one and learned one from the other. Explains the Gemara, tzrichi, no indeed, we needed to write both psukim in the Torah that you have an obligation to help the owner unload and load. Because Rachmana prika, if we only would have said unloading, because the animal's in pain, and the kiss the owner. Avaltina to load up the animals, because the animal's not going to get ruined. Maybe you don't have to help the owner. If we only spoke about loading the animal, the reason is because that's how you take wages for Avalprika, that's what we had to lay, right? Both cases. Well, Rav Shimon says the Gemara, and according to Rav Shimon, he says the psukim are not definitive. Rav Shimon because Rav Shimon holds that even ti'ina, even the halacha of loading the animal has to be done for free. It's not something that one can take wages for. Michael, Rav Shimon says the Gemara, why did the Torah have to write both these dinim? Why do we have to write Aveda? Once we know there's a din of helping the animal, which would be obvious that you have to return an item. Says the Gemara, because why? Because there's both pain to the owner and pain to the animal. When it comes to lost object, the owner is in pain. Less the animal is not. I would have thought because the owner is not there with the object, therefore he can't get it back on his own, so therefore you have an obligation to return it. Avalahani tarti, as we turn over to Lamed Alpha Mebei, is loading and unloading the animal. In both of those cases, the Isa Lamari Bahada, the owner is there. So I would think maybe the fact that the owner is here, you don't have an obligation. Let the owner take care of it on his own. The Isa Lamari Bahada, the owner is there. Malai. Therefore, the Torah had to write those cases. And we continue with more drashais of more doubled up languages in the psukim. Says the Gemara in the second line of Lamed Aleph and Beis, Mois Yubais Hamaka, should surely be put to death. The one who hit a convicted murderer is killed. Ein li'ela, says the Gemara, we only learn out from here. B'misa ksuva bai, b'misa she'im i'ata yachal ha'misa misa. How do you know? Let's say you can't give him the misa that the pasuk is written about him. How do we know that you're allowed to give him any death? And look at Rashi for a quick minute. Rashi says in the second line, Hainu Sayif. You have to kill him b'sayif, but he ran away. So how do you know that Bezdin can kill him even by throwing an arrow at him or drowning him? And the Gemara continues 6 lines down. You should surely hit. This is talking about Iranidachas. Ainli, which is a city that's condemned to the entire city being destroyed due to its worship of Avodah Zarah. How do we know if you cannot give them the death that's prescribed? How do we know you allowed to give them any death? And we continue. Says the Gemara 10 lines down. Hashev Tashev should surely return. This is talking about a mashkain. When you take a collateral security, you have to return it. But Mashkana shloiber shos bezdin minayin. How do you know you have to return it? Amalei Marshav to become makom. Chavol tachbol. Continues the Gemara about 12 lines down. The first one line is Chavol tachbol. This is talking about inflicting a. This is talking about Chavol tachbol, that if the pikadain is a baguette, a garment, you have to return it as well. Ein liela shemashkanoi bershus mashkanoi. Ein liela shemashkanoi bershus, that you took the mashkan with permission of Bezdin. Mashkanoi shaloi bershus minayin. I don't know if you took a shaloi bershus Bezdin. As Rashi says, the tzarach shava, that you still need to return it. And Rashi points out that stam chavala al be bezdini, because it's not normal for a person to have the chutzpah to take a collateral without the rishus of bezdin. So how do we know if you did that you still have a need to return it? Amalei mar chavol tachval mikol makom vanu trei kroy lamali. But says the Gemara, why do we need two different psukim teach us the same din about a pikadain? Chadach sosyaim. One is for daytime clothing and one is for nighttime clothing. Pasach tiftach. And we continue saying the Gemara that it says with regard to giving money to tzedakah, you should open your hand. How do we know you have to even give succah to the name of another city? Continues the Gemara, smack him in the Amid. The first one line is Nasain Titain. Another pasuk about giving to the poor. Ein Liela explains the Gemara, really know from here. Matana meruba, matana muet. As Menaim, how do we have to even give a small matana? Hanek tanek. This is talking about the Eved. When Eved leaves, there are special gifts. We learned about this extensively in the Gemara's in Kedushin. You have to give the Eved gifts when he leaves. Ein Liela, we only know from here that if the master's household was blessed based on the servant, manikim lai, that there are gifts that you give to him because you're happy with the work that he did, that your house had bracha whenever it was there. Or the Rav Elazar and Azariah Damar is that the only time you give gifts is if there's such a bracha. What does he do with that extra pasuk? Says Rav Elazar ben Azariah, that's just the way people talk. And 5 lines from the white lines, we finish up. Haveit tavitenu, says the pasuk with regard to lending people money. Lend, you should surely lend to them. He doesn't have any money, and he doesn't want to be supported by other people, so you're supposed to lend him. He has no money. He doesn't want to take tzedakah, so then you should lend him with halva. Yeshla, if he has money, but he doesn't want to be supported. He doesn't want to utilize his own money to feed himself. Always give him halva. Rav Shimon Damar Yeshla the guy has money, says Rav Shimon. He doesn't want to spend his money. We have to give him. So Tavitanu Lamali Tibra Taira Kalash Bnei Adam, says Rav Shimon. The Torah is just talking the way that people talk, and we'll pick it up from here. B'siyata Dishmaya.